This is the November meeting of the group Progressive Legacy. This afternoon, we're joined by two candidates for office in Montgomery County. The Honorable Perry Paylor, the Deputy State's Attorney in Prince George's County, and the Honorable Scott Goldberg, a member of the Montgomery County Central Committee and a candidate for Montgomery County Council at Large. Perry is a candidate for Montgomery County State's Attorney. Progressive Legacy is a small but active group which has been doing work around the county to advocate for voters' rights, civil rights, and a bunch of social justice activities. Many of our members are involved with democratic politics in Leisure World, and others of us are in downtown Silver Spring and in Wheaton and other places. So without further ado, we'll let our candidates talk to us and ask questions. We'll start now with Deputy State's Attorney Perry Paylor, who's going to share with us his vision for the Montgomery County State's Attorney's Office. Perry, I turn it over to you.
All right, thank you, Alan. And I want to thank Progressive Legacy for allowing me to address you this evening. So first, I'd like to say hello. I just want to give you a brief summary of my background. I was raised here in Montgomery County. I went to elementary, junior high, and high school here in Montgomery County. Graduated from Paint Branch High School. Went to college at Hampton University in Hampton, Virginia. Went to law school at North Carolina Central Law School and became licensed to practice law in the state of Maryland in 1996. In 1998, early in my career, I joined the State's Attorney's Office for Prince George's County as a line attorney. Was there for a little less than 5 years, and then I went into private practice for about 15 years, from 2003 to end of 2018. And when I was at the State's Attorney's Office as a line attorney, I matriculated all the way to the major crimes unit. So you start out in misdemeanor crimes, then move on to your narcotics cases, and then you move to major crimes. The difference between narcotics and then the major crime cases, you start to have victim crimes, armed robberies, carjackings, robberies, things of that nature, burglaries, break-ins, things like that. At the time, sadly, during that period, towards 2000, about 20 so years ago, homicides were very high. So while I was not in the homicide unit, I did handle homicide cases. In 2003, I entered private practice, and Prince George's County government was my largest client. I still did some criminal defense, some personal injury, and I worked on economic development issues, and I served as bond counsel when the county issued public debt. So the largest project that you're probably aware of that I had the opportunity to work on was the National Harbor Project. And so particularly that area of Oxon Hill, during my time as a narcotics prosecutor, we spent a large amount of our time in Oxon Hill. And, at the end of it, we know that the biggest tool in fighting crime is economic development. So we were able to put about $100 million in public dollars into that project. We attracted national developers, and we started from scratch and built what we know as National Harbor today. After that project was done, I spent time doing affordable housing. And once again, we had targeted certain areas that were notorious, and we put in public to do affordable housing. And our biggest problem in some of the drug-infested areas was protecting our demolition team and our contractors, because these were drug-infested areas, but we knew we had to, and one of the things that we wanted to be clear, it wasn't the residents, right? We learned early on that certain areas, it just attracted folks from other areas. So we put public dollars in there, improved the neighborhood. We're able to allow the residents to move into new housing and new opportunities and just changing neighborhoods. And so that's, where my career was. In 2018, Ms. Braveboy won the election and asked me to come back and lead joint leadership. I started out as chief of the Guns and Drugs Unit. From that, I was tasked with focusing and changing our policy regarding the prosecution of marijuana. And so we took a real hard look at it. And the issue is that back in 2014, less than 10 grams of marijuana was decriminalized. And since that time, it's been at different stages of legality around the Beltway. And to be quite candid, we can drive around the Beltway today between Maryland, DC, and Virginia, and we'd be subjected to 3 different laws regarding marijuana. And we realized that it's confusing. It was confusing to the police. Quite candidly, it's confusing to the judges, and it's also confusing to the end user, right? When in private practice, I represented a gentleman who could walk across the street in the District of Columbia, get a can full of marijuana for free, and walk back to the Silver Spring Metro and was arrested and couldn't believe what was going on. And, you know, I was retained, so we had to hire a lawyer and go through all the rigors of that. We were ultimately able to get the case dismissed, but it's that kind of confusion that causes a lot of interaction between citizens and police. So what we did is we stopped altogether prosecuting possession cases. And so at the time, that was very timely because in 2019, I came in January of 2019. By June of 2019, by June of 2019, hemp became legalized. And so hemp comes from the same plant, but it's less than 0.3% THC. So now in order to proceed with that, we had to distinguish marijuana from hemp. And it would cost us to make that distinction $157,000 per month in unlimited funding, right? So based on that, we stopped all prosecution of all possession cases. Sadly, with the marijuana trade, there is violence connected to the black market. So we had to escalate our thresholds for very large amounts and then, you know, concentrating on the guns and some of the crime that's tangent to the marijuana trade. So that's just some of the things I did as deputy. I managed a diversion program for drug dealers called the Back on Track program, and I'll talk about that in a second. And then in August of 2020, I was promoted to deputy state's attorney. So right now, on any given day, I manage 1,000 criminal cases. Prince George's County is definitely the most progressive state's attorney's office in the state. And so we are called upon by state's attorney's offices throughout the state to advise and to really give guidance on a lot of the programs that we started. We manage about 5 diversion programs. And so I'll talk about them as I get into my platform. But part of my platform is going to be one, particularly as we come out of COVID, this is very important. We have to decriminalize behavior health, right? We know that people have mental health issues, and there is an intersection between mental health and criminal justice system, and we have to be more strategic, surgical of how we deal with these incidents. And part of it is that you need to have a behavioral health specialist, a doctor in the office, whether it's by contract or whether it's on his employee. Because what happens is attorneys get reports and we're not doctors, and literally we get that if you have a 9 a.m. court case, the person's evaluated in Crownsville, Maryland, you might not get your medical report till 8:45, 8:50, walking into a 9:50 hearing, trying to explain to a judge. So the motto in our office is going to be see the whole person, right? We want to be able to present to the judge the whole person, and we want to know the whole person in tailoring our sentencing recommendations. Another place, and I specifically differ with the incumbent, is how we treat youthful offenders. We know that the brain science has taught us that young people don't fully mature into adults until about 26, right? But often, particularly in Montgomery County, youthful offenders are charged as adults. And I believe in the science that says treatment can benefit youthful offenders. So it'll be, you know, my goal is to keep youthful offenders in juvenile court as long as possible so they can receive the maximum treatment. And thirdly, and we've seen this in COVID, is that offenses against our senior population has escalated. And what we've seen is scams like the lottery scams, scams like your grandchildren are arrested, and there's, for delinquent taxes, there's an IRS warrant, things of that nature. And so what I'm going to do is break out a separate unit to deal with these crimes, because a lot of them have been wire crimes, like they want you to give bank account numbers and they want to attack you through the computer, which is for the most part regulated by the FTC. But I want to make sure that we have local prosecutors who are engaged in the case and can even help guide victims through the process, because it's confusing. It's very tough to try to track. If someone scams a person out of $50,000, but they live in Florida, the local prosecutors now will tell you, hey, there's nothing we can do. You have to talk to a federal person. You have to talk to, someone from the FTC, and you get involved in this extremely overwhelming process. So we're going to have a unit specifically dealing with our aging population to try to continue to help them with current cases, but also advise and consult on how to protect yourselves from those crimes. So those are just going to be some of the things that I'm going to work on. Two things I want to mention. We've seen an influx in ghost guns, and that's a term of art people use. Ghost guns are what are known as manufactured guns. So now you cannot order a gun over the internet, but you can order the pieces, and then people can actually put together guns, and they are just as deadly as guns you buy from the store. Usually we've seen that these are guns that are purchased by persons who, based on criminal histories, cannot purchase a gun legally. So I will be very aggressive when it comes to ghost guns. And also what we've noticed, particularly starting with the pandemic, there's been an increase in carjacking cases. Carjackings are up 300% around the Beltway. And so what we have to do, one of the things is that I lead a task force in Prince George's County targeting regarding carjacking. And it's more than just police and arrests. We do have one committee that details just deterrence. We also have an education committee. We also have a communications committee where we work with parking planning in the public schools to increase activities, particularly on the weekends. And then we have a communication committee where we actually produce commercials. We got some of the local celebrities that are in the bands, and we produce a television commercial. It's advising young people of the drawback of being involved in carjacking incidents. So these are just some of the things that make up my platform. And so, like I said, we will decriminalize behavioral health. We will keep young people in juvenile court as long as possible. We're going to be very aggressive when it comes to violent crime. We're going to go after ghost guns and carjacking cases, and we're going to have a unit dedicated to our senior population and some of the issues that they face. And I could go on longer, but I want to pause and make sure I leave time for questions.
Well, thank you, Mr. Paylor, for joining us this afternoon. I'll start off with a question, which is, if you had to identify 3 reasons why the incumbent should not be reelected and we should move in a new direction in the Montgomery County State's Attorney's office, how would you clearly identify those 3 priorities? Because I'm thinking some of these issues are similar across jurisdictions, and you have to make a compelling argument why we should go with somebody different. Are there 3 policy areas that you have problems with the current incumbent, and you would make modifications?
Yeah, well, the first one, I can give you 3. The first one is diversion programs. So what diversion programs are, that period between the initial arrest and being sentenced and having a conviction on your record. Our office, where I currently sit, leads the state. We have about 5 or 6 diversion programs. And let me talk to you about one of them. we have what's called the Back on Track program. Now, in this instance, you have to actually plead guilty. The Back on Track program is for first-time felony drug dealers. In the 80s and 90s, people started to recognize that drug addiction was a medical issue, so there was resources put towards persons with addictions. And so when drug dealers were being arrested, then they were raising their hand and saying, hey, I have a problem, I'm addicted and I want to be in the program. And, you know, police, everybody said, hey, look, we found $50,000 cash in your house. Sir, you're not addicted. And they wanted to just take up the opportunities for people who were really addicted. So this program, Back on Track, was created by Vice President Kamala Harris. There's no addiction treatment. It's for actually people who are drug dealers. They have to enter the program. They have to enter a plea of guilty. They have a conviction on their record. Then they have to do 280 hours of community service. Then there's also an education component, either a certificate or an associate's program they're eligible for that we pay for through grants through the program. And then we connect them with employment services. Once all that has been completed, it usually takes anywhere between 12 to 18 months. We have a graduation where their records are expunged and they walk out of the courthouse with a clean record and to a large extent, a job. So that's a track program. That's one of the programs I would bring. We have diversion programs. Sadly, one that, you know, we had to come up with is we have, well, gangs are fueled by three revenue streams: drugs, guns, and sex workers. So we commercial sex workers, we have a program when a lot of times young women are brought to this country, young people, majority are, however, brought to this country, disconnected, don't speak the language, and then forced into the life of being commercial sex workers. On the night of arrest, we run a diversion program where we use the criminal justice system as a tool to give them a means to escape. So that night, we have nonprofits that will come to the courthouse, to the jailhouse that night and provide these women opportunities to leave right out of the back of the courthouse, no paperwork, no choice. You get housing, you get shelter, you get connected with means to provide for yourself, whether it's to relocate you back home with your family, if you can do that, or whether it's to help you start a new life here in the States. And so that's another program that I will bring here. When I'm elected, I'll bring the Montgomery. We have a plethora of programs. So one is diversion. Two is what I've already mentioned. I will make a concerted effort to keep our youthful offenders in juvenile court. And I just think it's important that our practice now as prosecutors should match the science. We know better now, so I think we have to do better. And lastly, diversity is important. There are about 24 elected state's attorneys in the state of Maryland. There are only 4 African-American deputy attorneys, 2 of which reside in Montgomery County. Neither of us work in Montgomery County. Montgomery County has not, in the history of the office, had a person of color elected, but they have not ever allowed a person of color to be elevated to the position of deputy. So one of the things that my administration will bring is an dual policy. Excellence is going to be the standard, but I believe excellence can be found in more than one particular race or gender. So the office is going to be, for people that live here and like myself, raised here, but they've done well in school, they passed the bar, they're going to know that they're going to have a real opportunity to come in and thrive in the state's attorney's office. So I think those are 3 areas that separate myself from the incumbent. Can you guys hear me? Hear me?
Yes.
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 Okay.
Yes.
Your audio is a little questionable.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm getting one thing. All right, I'll speak up a little bit.
Okay.
Did that answer your question? Were those the 3 areas?
Thank you very much. Other people, other questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to know if there's anything you could do to make a coordination at the DMV, because that's ridiculous for people to be so confused about the marijuana laws.
Yeah, I think that when I will work with the delegation to push towards legalization. And like I said, my angle is not to increase the number of end users, but we have to stop the violence, and I want to stop the unnecessary interaction between law enforcement and citizens. So based on that, I would work with the delegation to, move in the direction of legalization. And one of the things is I would have a person dedicated on my staff to attend and work with the planning board. Because one of the things I want to focus on, because I have that economic development background, is balanced growth, right? I want to make sure that all the marijuana shops don't end up all on one part of the county. It needs to be evenly distributed, and I would make sure that our office is represented to make sure that it's spread out fair.
Other questions?
I have a question. It may not be something particular that you can address, but I have concerns about sanctuary cities. We happen to have multinational population in Montgomery County, more so than other counties, and didn't know what your feeling was on sanctuary city.
Well, in terms of being a sanctuary city, I believe Tacoma Park claims that to be a sanctuary city.
Yes.
I believe. What I would tell you is that the focus of my administration would be state laws. And when people violate state laws, I would have no interest in collaborating or working with ICE. We would just focus on state laws, and I would focus on making sure everyone was treated fairly based on their allegations of violating a state law.
Perry, how much cooperation, how much work do you do with the other state's attorneys surrounding Prince George's County? What's your interaction on a daily or weekly basis with Montgomery?
Well, with Montgomery, sometimes there are conflict cases. So I came over, they asked me to come over on a conflict case. If there's a relative or of someone in the office that happens to find themselves charged with a crime, then they get a prosecutor from another county. So I have had the occasion to come over to Montgomery County and serve as a conflict counsel for one of theirs. Right now, like I said, I supervise 4 prosecutorial units, and we have a conflict case where one of our prosecutors used to be a defense attorney for a defendant. So we brought in a Montgomery County state's attorney to come help us with that. So we coordinate. One of the things is that there's different task force. So we have, and I chair the carjacking task force for Prince George's County, right? But there's a regional carjacking task force by the U.S. Attorney's Office, and we work with, it's DC, Montgomery County, and Prince George's County, and we look at the trends, between the 3 jurisdictions. So that's just one instance where we work together. But besides prosecutors, I do have the opportunity for both Prince George's and Montgomery County now as deputy working towards legislation. So we work with legislation with elected persons from different counties, and our office is often called upon to give testimony. I'm working on ghost gun legislation right now, and working with Delegate Lopez from Montgomery County. But we work with different elected officials from all over the state, because when there's certain areas where they know we have a particular expertise.
And maybe one last question for you. We could come back later at any time if anybody wants to ask you questions. As you traveled around Montgomery County in your campaign, how have you been received? What kind of questions do voters ask about your campaign for state's attorney?
Well, first, we have really been well received. I think people like the vision that we've been able to articulate for the office. And to tell you the truth, the way I came about deciding to run is that different Democratic groups continue to invite my boss over to Montgomery County to speak. And the question that kept being asked is, why don't we have those diversion programs? Why don't we have some of the programs that you have for the youth? Why don't we have that in Montgomery County? And the real thing is what we've known, people like me that grew up here, why isn't Montgomery County leading in that area? Why aren't we the leaders in the state? We have the resources, we have the talent, And that's when I came to the decision, who is best, who's better qualified to make the changes that the voters want in Montgomery County other than myself. And instead of driving 30 miles away while I serve as a deputy, I'll ride right up the road and I can make the changes right here in Montgomery County. And so I'm hoping with your support, we can make that happen.
Well, thank you. We could, it's a good place to conclude your part of this presentation. If people feel like they have other questions to ask you, Perry, they can do so later. Right now, I want to turn our attention to a good friend of Montgomery County, a person who's been working really hard for many, many years on our behalf, Scott Goldberg, a personal friend who is a member of the Democratic Central Committee. He's a very successful businessman in his own right in Montgomery County, and he's now a candidate for Montgomery County Council at Large. Scott, please, we're happy to have you here. Please share your vision and your priorities for the Montgomery County Council.
Happy to be here. That's quite the introduction. The fascinating thing about being a candidate, all these people now start introducing you at these presentations, and such high praise. I mean, Gail and Craig, I've been friends with your son for 15 years, and Rosie and Hank, we've seen you in some Ike Leggett t-shirts, and Tanya and I were in the same leadership Montgomery class in 2019, and Mary Lynn, we see her everywhere running for judge, and Betty, great to see you, and Sandra and Barbara, I don't know if we've met, but I'm vaccinated, so in person, there's a big hug for you.
Well, thank you for that.
No problem. So I'm going to tell you, I'm going to tell you why I'm running. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, even though I don't like talking about myself that much. And then I'm going to talk about some things that I think are important to Montgomery County and reasons why I think people should vote for me. So Montgomery County should be excellent in every single thing that it does. And I think we can all agree. And for the most part, we do pretty well, but we're not quite where we should be. We have a lot of human resources and certainly financial resources. And I don't think we're taking full advantage of that the way we should be. So I like to think I'm pretty good at self-analysis. I'm not going to be president of the United States. I'm not going to be the governor of Maryland. I'm not going to Congress. If the voters will have me, I'm going to be in the county council for 4, 8, or 12 years. I'm going to give it 110%, and then I'm going to pass it off to people who have new energy. And that's why I'm running for the county council. A little bit about me. Like Alan, I hail from New Jersey, came down here to the University of Maryland 21 years ago. Go Terps. Graduated with a degree in business and another degree in government and politics. And shortly after, moved in with my then girlfriend. We met sophomore year. We were both born in the same hospital in northern New Jersey. Came down to the University of Maryland. We're both left-handed. Our social security numbers are 3 digits different, and we've lived no more than 10 minutes apart from each other our entire lives.
Wow.
A little small world there.
That's funny.
So needless to say, didn't leave Maryland. Shortly thereafter, started a residential property management company with a laptop computer and a coffee table, which is turning 15 years old in April. And we have 14 employees. So we're pretty proud of that. Somewhere along there, I decided to go to law school at night. So we were working during the day, went to law school at night at the University of Maryland, commuted up to Baltimore, graduated, passed the bar, didn't find any jobs that I loved. So put everything I had back into that property management company to build that. In 2014, many of you were with me, but managed Ike Leggett's last re-election campaign, where he was successful in a 3-way primary, obviously won the general. In 2015, helped Jamie Raskin on a volunteer basis get his campaign up and going, setting him up with some professional staff, and would hang out in his living room and hang out in his office at American University and call people and ask them for money. And then he got his professional staff up, and I went back to my semi-normal life. got elected to the Central Committee in 2017, was chair from 2018 to 2019. In the general election in 2018, for all 32 state races and all 14 county races, if you took the Republican vote total and doubled it just for fun, the Democrats still would have won. So we're pretty
Wow.
proud of our party's performance a couple of years ago. And since then, and throughout much of that, have these two little kiddos over my shoulder, a girl and a boy. My wife and I will be married 14 years this summer, and we live in the Four Corners neighborhood of Silver Spring. Some of the issues that I really want to focus on, and I'm going to pull a little bit from Perry's presentation. He said economic development is the best way to fight crime. So Baird Rustin, civil rights leader, named an elementary school after him, said sustained high economic growth is a precondition to the creation of a more equal society. So with that in mind, one of the big things that I like talking about is creating economic advancement in Montgomery County. So if you've got your $15 an hour job, what Scott wants to see is that there is a $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year job behind that. And then there are six-figure jobs after that. In the last 10 years or so, Montgomery County has been gaining lower wage jobs, $60,000 a year and below, which for here isn't a huge amount of money. And we've been losing those six-figure jobs. So there is not the ability for upward advancement that there should be in this county. So my plan is called H4: healthcare, hospitality, high tech, and if you're thirsty, hops, which is an ingredient in beer. So hospitality, Montgomery County is home to about half of the entire nation's hotel industry. So Marriott, Host Hotels, Choice Hotels, they manage literally millions of hotel rooms throughout the globe. High tech, so we've got NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and we've got the Cyber Security Center for Excellence. Healthcare, did you know that there's a company in Montgomery County that is about to cure AIDS?
Yes,
Yep. They, I think they
Wow.
got approved today to start their medication on their third human, which is incredibly exciting. Not to mention everything we do at NIH, Walter Reed, and the FDA, and the hundreds of companies up and down the 270 corridor and throughout the county that are just curing diseases. United Therapeutics, that is an absolute fascinating story. She started it. She had a child who had this condition that was incurable, and basically found a patent that was sitting on a shelf at a big pharmaceutical company. Eventually was able to buy it and created United Therapeutics. And then hops. So Montgomery County, through a change in their law a number of years ago, was able to develop and create an atmosphere for the craft brewing industry. And I'm not saying we're Napa Valley or Sonoma Valley, or people are going to come here and from all across the country and taste our beer, but they're definitely going to come from around in the area. And when they go into DC and they get super hot from looking at all the monuments, our pitch is going to be spend a couple days in Montgomery County, do a little agro-tourism, check out our breweries, cool off, and then go back home. Another issue that I'm pretty serious about revolves around the she-cession. So she and recession, she-cession. So at the beginning of the pandemic and during it, and even now, women have borne the brunt of sort of the economic downturn, mainly because of childcare. And even before the pandemic, we've been talking about childcare pretty seriously, but haven't done a whole lot about it. So if you hear a lot of these Friday job reports, the first of the month, you'll hear lots of jobs. It turns out men were gaining them at a higher total than what the net was, and women were continuing to lose jobs throughout the pandemic, and that's still happening in some places right now. So we kind of have to get serious about childcare so that women can have equal access to the workforce. So these two beauties, in-home daycare, in someone's basement, which is probably the cheapest you're going to get, about $10,000 a year. That's a lot of money, $200 a week. That's not attainable. That's not affordable for a lot of people. So Scott's going to work on that. And then I think the third big issue that I want to focus on is the environment. We need to basically reverse the damage we have done to the earth so that we and future generations can continue to enjoy it. So we need to preserve green space. I would put solar panels on everything, but they are much more economical if you put them just on land. And there were some proposals about that last year in the council. We can do things to put them more on roofs, but a lot of rooftop solar panel just isn't economical unless you're replacing the roof at the same time. But I think every school that we build too, we should undertake the expense of making it a net zero school. So Howard County has a net zero school, doesn't produce any energy. And we are building a lot of new schools here. And we have that opportunity to basically hit our goals of reducing our greenhouse gases by the year 2035 that's called for in our county's climate action plan. And that is Scott in a nutshell. I would love to take your questions.
I have a question.
Barbara.
Before I say it, I went to grammar school in Caldwell, New Jersey when I was a kid, so I don't know if you were there. Anyway, my question is, do you think housing is a major problem for a middle and lower income residents here? It seems to be a big problem.
I think if someone says it's not a problem, they really don't know the county very well. You know, to find a proper, you know, even like a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment for $1,000 a month, my company's affordability metric would say you need to make about $40,000 a year to do that. So you're not living anywhere near larger job centers, Silver Spring, Bethesda, Kensington. You're out in Germantown, probably, and further, or Burtonsville. And there is no really good transportation to get here.
So what's the solution?
So that's a great question. So here's a little bit why I'm different, kind of saying the quiet part out loud. We can only manage it so much on the expense side, right? So you're not going to make housing, you're not going to bring housing costs down to zero. You can bring them down a little bit with more supply, requiring new projects of a certain size, just like we have MPDUs. We can have 3 and 4 bedroom properties. But it's creating those jobs where people get paid a living wage so that they can afford what's here, and then making sure supply keeps up so that prices don't spike, right? That's a choice we can make to allow targeted, reasonable housing. If you hear a dog in the background, it's because there's a dog in the background.
Well, thank you for that.
Sure.
I want to know if you're doing public funding.
Public financing, absolutely. So we have been calling people for about 5 or 6 weeks. It is a really cool, really innovative program, and it is incredibly inclusive, right? So there are some people where $5 is a lot to them, and it's really meaningful when they agree to contribute that to our campaign.
You need to tell us how we donate.
Votescott.org. I'll put it in the chat too.
Okay. Mr. Paylor better do that too.
Yeah, he should tell you to go to votescott.org. I agree. Absolutely.
Okay.
Scott, what do you see as current problems with the Montgomery County Council and the county executive? What would you like to see them do more of? Do you think they're doing a good job?
So part of my pitch to people too is I get along with everyone. We can disagree about anything, but we're not going to be disagreeable. We're going to be civil. If you watch enough hearings between the council and the executive, you might notice there's a little tension at times. I have a good relationship with all 9 council members. A lot of the new candidates that are running, and all the 4 county executive candidates that are running, including Mark. We had lunch a couple of weeks ago. Where do I think the council could be doing better? I want to talk about schools. Okay. So I'm sure you guys know this because you're super involved, but for the millions of people who are going to view this on YouTube, our school system has a $3 billion annual operating budget. It's got $1 billion+ 6-year capital budget. It's got 208 schools. It's got over 20,000 staff. It is overseen by our elected Board of Education, who I have great respect for, and do not envy their job over the last year and a half. And they're all great people. They are part-time. They get paid about $25,000 a year. And that is not a recipe for success to oversee something that large and, quite frankly, that meaningful. 160,000 students too. And we would need state legislation to enact this. I would want to work with my colleagues on the county level, colleagues on the state level, and see if we can find the money and create the enabling legislation to have a full-time, compensated accordingly, and given their own staff to be able to collaborate with, but also oversee MCPS.
Other questions? It's good to see you. As new lines are being drawn in the county, and we're always seem to forget about the eastern side of the county, what are your plans to support Burtonsville, Calverton, and northern Silver Spring?
Spencerville, and a lot of great places. So I live a block away from 29. You know, I'm not going to claim ownership or residency of the East County, but certainly we live pretty close to there. You've got to be able, the squeaking wheel gets fixed. And quite often there are different communities that speak up and advocate more and more loudly than other areas. People have lives, you know, people have different interests. People sometimes can't go to a lot of meetings. So I think as a government, we need to say, hey, East County deserves more resources. And we need to sort of be able to stand up and justify giving a higher proportion of resources to the places that need it more, right? So if you look at the difference between equity and equality, right? So equality, everyone gets shoes that are the same size. Equity, everyone gets a shoe that fits them properly. And I think there are just so many opportunities to do that in the county, especially with the shopping center.
Yes.
And I think that it comes down to disposable income, right? You need housing that's close enough where people make enough money to spend at the shopping center, right? So these are within, you know, specific plans and master plans and general plans, you know, just areas that we can work with. I'm with you. I'm with you, Greg.
Do you approve of what's been done? I don't know if the county has voted on it yet, but the redistricting and the new districts, county council districts.
So there's going to be a couple public hearings.
Oh, okay.
You know, to be honest, they had a process. You could watch it on the internet. It was over many months. We all know Sam Statland and Valerie. I think he presented to this group. So they did a lot of outreach. They were open about their objective. They wanted to create as many minority majority districts that they could. And I feel that they did. There are some neighborhoods in some areas that aren't happy with how it turned out. Leisure World, for example, I've seen some communications. The greater Bethesda Chevy Chase Chamber of Commerce is not terribly excited that North Bethesda and Tacoma Park are together. But I think those differences are going to work out, and I think they'll approve a map hopefully by Thanksgiving, but definitely by Christmas. Maybe even during Hanukkah.
we hope so. Maybe you can give us your opinion about some of the transportation issues in the county. Do you support bus rapid transit? Do you support what the plans are to put hot lanes on 270, the plans to replace the American Legion Bridge?
So I definitely support bus rapid transit. So we've got it on 29. We're going to get it, I think, on 355. We're going to get it on the Veers Mill corridor. I think some people differ. I think it should be dedicated lanes. It was sold as a plan where the state would give us enough space, so these buses would be operating on their own. So they'd be more express than traveling in traffic. So that's how I think the buses should be done. I-270, I do not think it should be widened. And quite frankly, I don't think I'm gonna be able to have a say in a year. They're, I believe, gonna come to a deal early next year. A couple council members have intimated that there is a negotiation taking place with the state, that the state might give us some, if they do toll lanes, they'll pay for a project of our choosing.
Payoff.
Like the Florida City's Transit Way, for example.
Or the entirety of the BRT on 355. Those are two projects that I had heard were in the mix.
Okay, more questions for Scott. I want to zoom back then to Perry Paylor. Scott, don't go anywhere, please. Perry, I was just curious, do you support public financing for these state positions? State's attorney, clerk of the court, register of Wilson, sheriffs. There's been a bill introduced by, I believe, Eric Lutke, delegate in District 14, to have public financing for those positions. I wonder if you have a opinion on that, and then maybe in the same answer, how do you see those state offices working together and supporting each other?
Yeah, I wouldn't be opposed to public financing in that race. I'm a first-time candidate, and we're raising money countywide to be able to compete. And it's obviously it's a challenge, and we want a system that allows our best and brightest the opportunity to participate. And so we don't want financing to be a barrier to talented persons to enter the arena. So I wouldn't be opposed to that. That would be fine with me. Yeah, in terms of campaigning and working together, that's great. I think people should know, particularly if you don't have an occasion to, luckily you're not charged or you're not in the system, people don't always know what the different offices do, So I think it's good that we can inform and educate the public on the function of the state's attorney, the clerk of court, and the sheriff. Some people confuse the sheriff with the police, and the sheriff is the enforcement arm of the court. So they're not necessarily police. While they're sworn officers, they have a different function. And same with the clerk of court, they have a different function as opposed to the elected state's attorney. And we call it state's attorney in Montgomery County, but it is the district attorney, if you're familiar with the more common name, and that's the county's top prosecutor.
Yes, Scott.
Questions? Hank, did you think something?
Scott raised his hand.
So we're going to tag team this, Perry. So the sheriff, like we talk about housing a lot, the sheriff is responsible for posting notices for people getting evicted. As a progressive organization and progressive human beings, we should definitely push that when law enforcement interacts with people who could benefit from serious assistance, like that is an opportunity that in my mind we are missing. So technically I'm an attorney. My mom says, but I volunteer with Maryland Legal Aid at Landlord Tenant Court. I've done it a couple times in the last year and a half and represented tenants in court. And sometimes that's the first time that someone is offering assistance. So we've had, you can get an attorney. We've had a lot of rental assistance in the last year and a half, and we're just not meeting people where they are. So when you guys talk with sheriffs, like, this is something you should definitely bring up with them.
Good point.
So Scott, first, and then Perry, what are the takeaways that you'd like us to hold on to from this conversation?
That you should vote for us and contribute to our campaigns. So the takeaway that I would like you to remember is that Scott is a loyal Democrat. He is experienced, he has deep roots in the county, and he is incredibly qualified. And that he deeply, deeply, deeply cares about the future of all 1.1 Montgomery County residents.
Thank you very much. And Perry Paylor, what are the takeaways that you'd like us to hold on to from this conversation?
Well, I'm definitely going to borrow some from Scott. Please definitely vote for me, donate to our campaign, but also tell your friends. Tell your friends, that you had the opportunity to speak with both of us and support for us, please. And really, I have the experience. I'm the only current deputy running. On any given day, I manage 1,000 criminal cases, and I just position me well to take over the state attorney's office, but move it in the direction that we feel is more in line with the values of the citizens of Montgomery County. So I believe finishing my qualifications really sets me apart from the rest of the field. And I thank you again, and I appreciate the opportunity to address you today.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to have both of you this afternoon talking to Progressive Legacy about your campaign for Montgomery County State's Attorney and Montgomery County Council person at large. We're sure we'll see you many, many times between now and Election Day around the county. And we ask you to stay in touch with us. My computer just came on.
All right.
Wonderful. Yay.
Oh, hello.
Well, it took a while.
And, I really want to thank all of you for participating this afternoon. As I mentioned in my email, I'd love to have the members of Progressive Legacy stay on the call after we say goodbye to our guests. So on behalf of Progressive Legacy, thank you to Perry Paylor, candidate for Montgomery County State's Attorney, and to Scott Goldberg, candidate for Montgomery County Council Member at Large. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Good.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you.
So shall I stop it now?
Yeah.